Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Newbies workshop, all about truths and lies and teaching to children with learning challenges. So Jen is joining me right now, and we are still getting used to the new Sonlight Connections app. So please bear with us. We would love for you to put your questions or your comments in the chat. And assuming we can see everything like we're supposed to, we'll be able to answer those for you. So Jen and I are going to do our best today to make sure that we're answering your questions. If you are watching this after the fact, definitely put your questions or comments in the comment box and we can help you out then. Also, I wanted to tell you all happy World Read Aloud Day. Today is actually World Read Aloud Day. And as you know, if you use Sonlight, we really value read aloud. So we will be talking today, and I'm going to start with some introductions. Sorry, I'm hearing alerts going off on my computer. I thought I closed everything down, so hopefully it's not too distracting for you all, or hopefully you can't hear it. But let's start with introductions. Jen, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you?
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm one of the mentors here on the new Sonlight Connections app. I have been homeschooling 4 kids for a little over 20 years. That doesn't mean I'm, super expert, great at every single thing, as you're about to find out. But, Sonny and I are going to talk about some stuff and see if we can't make some troubles eased a little.
Absolutely. So yeah, this will be available for replay. You'll be able to access it in the Sonlight Connections app, as well as on YouTube. If you are trying to find some of the older Newbies workshops that we did earlier in the year on the old app, you can find those on YouTube as well. We have an entire playlist for you. So this session is really meant to encourage you. When we say truths and lies, these are the things that oftentimes you might tell yourself, or maybe somebody else tells you about homeschooling or your ability to homeschool, and it makes you start to question things. And I know, especially when you're new to homeschooling and you haven't seen, like Jen has said, she's been doing it 20 years. I'm in year 11. And so we've seen enough now that even when we have these feelings, I think sometimes it gets a little easier to handle them because they're temporary. But when you're starting out, it can feel really hard, or like you're the only one feeling this way. So we hope to encourage you through some of the lies you might be telling yourself or hearing from other people. So let's start with the big one. I'm not qualified to homeschool. I know this might come up when you're considering homeschooling, but also when you're doing it, if you've had a rough day, you may feel you're not qualified to homeschool. So Jen, what do you say to that?
Okay. Well, it's hard because if you're not qualified to be a dentist, it means that you haven't gone to school and had the professional training and, done the internship. And you either are or you're not. I'm not qualified to be a dentist, but qualified to homeschool is a little bit more of an organic thing. And what I repeat to myself all the time and try to tell other people is no one in the world is as invested in my children and their success as I am. There may be a teacher out there who knows more math, who understands some particular, academic thing, but no one is as invested in my kids' success as I am. And I really believe that is the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Because nobody loves your child as much as you do, on this earth. Also, another thing, remember that God gave you these children. You are not expected to homeschool all the children that you meet, right? It's just your specific children. And God equips you both to parent that child as well as to homeschool that child. So that is something, that I remind myself of, and I know early on, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to teach math? Or how am I going to teach science? Those types of things. But before your child starts school, you teach them everything already. And I think sometimes we forget that. Also, if you can read and learn along with your child, you don't have to have all the answers. So when my kids were in first grade, I didn't need to worry about their high school math because they were nowhere near it, right? And now that I do have that child taking algebra, I'm relearning it again because I had forgotten some of it. But your brain is still pliable. You can still learn new things. So really, at any point you are still able to homeschool that child as long as you can read along and learn along with them. And I think we all know we learn a ton with Sonlight that we either forgot or didn't learn when we were young. So yeah, that's a big one. Another one might be I'm failing as a partner, for our moms out there, as a wife, a mom, because I'm too busy homeschooling, or I can't maintain these other relationships in my life. What do you say to that?
Failing at one thing because I'm concentrating on something else is, that's just kind of life. Like when we're in college, we're, not with our family necessarily because we're busy being at school and studying, or maybe we're not working as much as we were before because now we're studying, and that's priority. So I think you have to know that your priorities change. And if I'm investing all day with my kids, then there are going to be relationships that I'm not giving as much time and attention to. And if I know my priorities ahead of time, then I can make decisions. And I know that choosing one thing is not choosing another thing. My husband all of a sudden is talking about going back to the gym, which I have done in the past, and I have done faithfully in the past. But in the last couple of years, I don't know, between COVID and like homeschooling older kids, it's just, I can't do it all at once. So, yeah, that might happen.
Yeah. And I think what you said at the beginning is key to that. And that's where your priorities. I think when you start homeschooling, it might be hard to realize like that is going to take up some time. That's a big deal. You are taking on the responsibility of educating your children. And so it's important that you do give that the amount of time that it requires. I know some people say, during the day, they put their phone on mute and they won't text or answer the phone while they're doing school, or maybe they don't answer the door when they're doing school, things like that, because you can be derailed by interruptions. And I know as far as like mom and wife and those types of things, your relationships within the home, you're getting to spend more time with your kids. So I actually think homeschooling has made me a better, more aware mom, I think, as far as really listening to my kids. I will be the first to say I'm not that warm, fuzzy person that just, is like, oh, children, tell me about your day, but because I homeschool, I get to have conversations with them throughout the day. So I actually think it's made me a better mom. And then my husband also works from home. I know that's not the norm, but all four of us are here all the time. So I also get to see him during the day. The kids get to see him. They get to watch us work. We get to do school with them. So it's really become kind of a family culture for us. And so learning is just part of that. I don't think you have to put things into a box or separate. Okay, now I'm going to be a good mom. Now I'm going to be a good wife. Now I'm going to homeschool. It becomes a good blend of all of those things.
I agree. I'm not really warm and fuzzy either. I'm not the fun mom. Like, I'm never going to be like, hey, let's bake cookies. I may say to a teenager, like, don't you want to bake me cookies? Because I've had a hard day. But like, I'm not warm and fuzzy either. But instead of everybody going their own direction all day, we can bond over Johnny Tremaine or John Adams or Napoleon or whatever. Like, we read the same stories, and so we have the same inside jokes, and we spend time together because we're always in the car. We're always, doing whatever we're doing. And so I think it's easier to have those family culture relationships when we are all at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like you said, you're spending that time together. Now, what about, so we mentioned, that neither one of us are the super warm, fuzzy, fun moms. So we might relate to this more than some of those warm, fuzzy moms are. But what about them? My kids are driving me crazy, and or they're seeing me falling apart. So we all have bad days. And I think oftentimes kids are protected from seeing their parents have a meltdown if they're off at school. But there's definitely, I think, especially back to the days when I had a baby, the baby's crying, I'm crying, the toddler's crying, like all of those different things. So how do you handle that, either the frustration maybe of just too much togetherness, or your kids seeing a side of you that you don't necessarily want them to see?
Yeah. So, oh boy, howdy. So I have 4 kids that I've homeschooled since forever. And the rule in our house is that if one kid is being a punk, you should just cut that out. And if 2 kids are being a punks, you should know better than to gang up on your mother. And if 3 kids are being punks, obviously mom is the one who needs the nap. Like, and I have just said to my kids, it's very humbling. Like, I'm obviously the problem. I'm going to go over here, or I'm going to go grocery shopping, or I'm going to go fold laundry in my room or whatever. And I'm going to come out when I'm nice. Not a week ago, I had to go into a kid's room and say, I'm sorry, I completely lost it. That wasn't actually about you. You caught me in the middle of being frustrated about something else. I'm sorry. And while that's not fun, because there are times we drive each other crazy all day, but I have to think that it's really, really good for my kids to see me lose it and then have to pull it back and come to them and apologize, or go to somebody else and apologize, or just be like, let's reboot. Like, you're losing it, I'm losing it. Let's reboot. Because if they don't ever see me do that, how are they ever going to learn to do that? And I mean, it's not pretty, but it's real for sure. My other thing is when we're all driving each other crazy, I'm sure your kids never bicker with each other, Sunny, but mine sometimes have. That is when we'll go to the park, we'll go to the pool, because we get to the pool and my kids just scatter. Like, find a friend, go in opposite directions, burn off 1,000 calories, and then we can be nice again later.
Yeah, I think that's huge, is if you're at each other's throats. I saw a question today, actually, from a Sonlight mom saying that her kids were fighting a lot with each other and just getting on each other's nerves. And so, yeah, I know trying to separate everyone, whether that be separating the kids from each other, separating them from you, take that little 5-10 minute break. I'm very much an introvert. I don't like a lot of noise in the background ever. Like, I'm the person that drives in my car with the radio off. I know my family thinks I'm insane because they all like music or a book or a podcast or something. No, I like peace and quiet. So I find I get very tense when there's a lot of commotion. So even if the kids are having a good time, if they're being loud, sometimes I have to walk into another room and just close the door, so that I don't come out, upset everyone. Like, would you just be quiet? So yeah, take those breaks. I think we think about sending a child to their room if they're getting out of line, or throwing a fit, or whatever, but we don't think about taking ourselves to our room, or send the kids outside if the weather's nice to run around, like you said, burn off that energy and give you a little peace and quiet. And then also, you mentioned apologizing to them. It's not fun. But I do think that one of the advantages we have in homeschooling our kids is that we get to have these real life circumstances all the time. And so there are times that we lose it and we have to apologize to our kids or our spouse or whoever we lose it with. And so I think it is important to model that to our kids and say, I'm sorry, I got upset, that was out of line, whether it was aimed at them or, like you mentioned, Jen, sometimes you're stressed about something else and you blow up on whoever's there. So make sure that you're taking those breaks. And if the troops are getting restless, is what I always say, then it's time to everybody separate. You go do this in your room. You go do this over here. Get up and jump around. I think exercise is super important for that as well. But definitely take those breaks. Don't feel like you have to be all in the same room all day long getting
because if we're having that day where everybody's frazzled and nobody's getting anything done anyway, and nobody's concentrating and nobody's listening and everybody's like ramped up, they're not learning anything anyway. Whatever math I force you to do in that moment is not going to stick. So we might as well take a chore break, take a walk break, take a nap, take 5 minutes, go to your corner, and then come back and be able to accomplish something. Because, I mean, if you're crying into your math book, it's not sticking anyway.
Yeah, that's such a great point too. I think sometimes we worry about, we're going to get behind if we don't push through this. But if it takes you an hour and it's miserable and it's not sinking in versus taking a 30-minute break and coming back to it later that day, you're probably going to achieve more in less time when everybody's in a good mood. Also, something else I wanted to bring up is if your child is tired, they are going to be in a bad mood most likely. So be aware of that with your teens. I see some people that want to get their kids up at 7 a.m. and get it done. And I get that that's great because you can be done sooner. But teens especially need more sleep. And you will find that they are much easier to work with and giving you less attitude and all of the things when they're rested. So you know, in our house, we're all night owls, so I don't care if my kids sleep in. I let them sleep in. I prefer they sleep in. But I know for some morning people, that is hard. So maybe you don't have to let them sleep all the way till noon if you don't want to, but just be aware that they are getting adequate sleep. And same thing for yourself. If you have a new baby and a toddler and you're not sleeping well, you know, maybe take those breaks throughout the day, try to take naps, things like that, because you probably are not functioning as well if you're tired either. Now let's talk about not getting everything done during the day. We talked about taking breaks and holding off, but what if you feel like you're just a hamster in a wheel, nothing's getting done, you know, you're not sure if school's getting done, you know, the chores aren't getting done, you know, what do you do about those?
Does that ever end? I mean, it really doesn't, right? Like, I feel like I'm at different points on the wheel, but it never really ends. So my policy for that is to pick things like on a rotating basis. I know I've said this before. I used to tell my husband that he could come home to a hot meal, happy, like clean children, educated children, a clean house, or a happy wife, and he could pick 3 any day. But like, if you expect the house to be clean and if you think I should have made dinner, then like, don't question the gum in their hair. You know what I mean? Like, I can't do it all at once. I can't. And I've given up trying to act like I can. And so on a day where I can't homeschool because the house is a mess, we're going to take 45 minutes and just do a huge sweep and clean everything so that I can think. Like, I can handle the noise, but I can't handle the visual clutter. So, you know, that becomes the priority. On a day where I'm like, so we're going on vacation this weekend. So right now I'm like, school will get done today because I'm not coming home to this. It will get done. It will get done. It will get done. And so we only have like 2 things left. Yay. But like, that's been the priority. The house being cleaned. I have to clean the house before I go because I can't come home to the mess. I don't mind leaving the mess, but I can't come home to a mess. So that will happen on Friday. So I'm ignoring it. I'm walking past all of it right now because I know that's on the calendar. Like, but I'm too busy today to get any of the house taken care of. So like, you know, today is work, relationships, and school, and like, that's the priority. In a week or in a month, it's all going to get done because I'm going to juggle, but I can't juggle it all at once. So my advice is always decide what the priorities are today or in this moment, because you can pick something different later, and then do that, understanding that, you know, there's A list and there's B list, and it's going to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm laughing inwardly because I'm very much the perfectionist. And when I only had one child and she was not being homeschooled yet, I mean, I had every Monday, I cleaned the bathrooms. Every Tuesday, I did this. Every Wednesday, I did this. And my house was always clean.
You sweet love.
Now, I love a clean house. That is like my love language would be a perfectly clean house all the time. But I live with 3 not naturally clean people. And all 4 of us are here all day with our 70-pound dog. Yeah. So as you can imagine, our house is almost never clean the way I want it to be. Yep. But like you said, you have to pick the priorities. If I know I have visitors coming to town, or maybe we're hosting a dinner party or something like that, we'll all chip in, do a giant family clean is what we call it, and clean everything. But on a day-to-day basis, we're looking at, okay, what are the things that really have to be done today? Yes, we need clean clothes, so we'll do laundry. Yes, we'll do the dishes so that our kitchen isn't just a disaster and we can actually make meals in there, all of those types of things. But yeah, you have to let go of the things that are not as big of a deal, which if nobody's here except us, that is something that's not as big of a deal. But Jen, like you said, if you're going on a trip and you don't want to come home to a messy house, you've got to get it done before.
Yeah.
I love what you said about school too. Homeschooling is great about it's flexible, so you can bring it on vacation with you, but we have found we never do as much in the car as we planned on, or those types of things. We might bring a read aloud or two, but yeah, if you can get a leg up on your schoolwork before you travel, that's usually helpful. Same thing with meals. If you can buy all your groceries at once, even if it takes you a little more time on the front end to do that meal plan, that's something that will save you time later. So look at what needs to be done. And yeah, Jen, I love the list that you gave your husband. You can have some, but not all.
Right. Well, you can have it all, but not all in one day. Like,
exactly.
You can take 3 new things tomorrow. I'm totally cool with that. But marriage is managing expectations. Am I right?
That's very true. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think that's great. Yeah. Figuring out what needs to be done now and then let some of those other things slide. So, that might be the schoolwork. If you're getting ahead in something, you might have time now to go do that extra load of laundry or something like that. Also enlist help where you can. We see this a lot, especially when it comes to chores or meals, where people are saying, oh my gosh, I'm feeding people 3 meals a day. I'm trying to homeschool. I'm doing all the chores. Start teaching your kids as soon as you can to help out with those things. That is something that we kind of did accidentally. Like, I don't think I consciously made the decision of, okay, I'm going to teach my kids how to make themselves breakfast, but we did. And now it is amazing because I only feed my family at dinner time and they get their own meals the rest of the day. They know how to clean up after themselves. So anything like that, I mean, I know if you have a bunch of littles, that's hard, but as they get to the point, especially my son is a grazer, he eats probably 7 times a day. So the fact that he can go find his own food now saves me a ton of time. So work on that with your kids too. What about the inevitable, am I messing my kids up somehow? Whether you think you're messing them up academically, socially, maybe you feel like you're just losing it and you're being a bad parent to them. How do you answer people when they have that question?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm messing my kids up, but I feel like we all mess our kids up in our own specific way. So, where my kids are, I mean, they have the qualities that I have. And is it genetic? Is it my fault? I don't even know. But, we get easily frustrated by math and science things. We can always put off actual work that needs to be done if we're in the middle of a good book. I mean, whatever, I feel like I'm messing my kids up, but I try very hard to accept that I'm not perfect. I'm raising kids who aren't perfect. They need to be educated. They need to be taught social skills. They need to be led in the right direction. But, the imperfect things are where the good stuff is. Like we were talking about, they see me all day. They see me when I'm mad. They see me when I'm frustrated. They see me when I'm tired. But that gives us the opportunity to talk about how to deal with life when I'm tired, or how to apologize when I have been too frustrated or whatever. And I think that that's the really good stuff. Because if I forget to teach them, the chemical symbol for something, they can go learn that. But if I don't teach them how to apologize when they're in the wrong, that can be devastating your whole life. I don't want them to have to go figure that out on some unsuspecting person, So I mean, all the ways I feel like I'm messing my kids up are really where the best stuff ends up being. And I say that because I have 2 kids in their 20s. When they were, 4 and 7, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not qualified. I am not a good enough person to be in charge of these humans. And, you know, they've turned out fine. They're delightful, productive adults. But I can absolutely see how I'm like, oh yeah, he got that from me. I'm so sorry. I'm always saying that to my daughter-in-law. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Right, and that may have been an issue with or without homeschooling, right? I think we see it magnified more because we're around them all the time. But I mean, your kids do turn out like you, at least to some extent, you know, because they're being raised by you.
Yeah.
But something that I think about is how many things are caught versus taught, right? Your kids emulate what they see you do.
Yeah.
So whether it's watching you and how you interact with the cashier at the grocery store, or, you know, how you interact with your neighbors or things like that. Like, these are important lessons too, that go way beyond school, that your kids get to witness because they are with you. So, you know, there are definitely days when I'm like, oh my gosh, like what in the world happened today? I was a horrible mother. I was, you know, yelling. I was angry about something or whatever. But then when somebody else says, oh, your daughter just helped me with this and she was amazing, she was so sweet, you know, and all of these things, then I'm like, oh, okay, so she's catching the good stuff too. It's not just those bad things. So I think hold on to that. And then as your kids get older, you will see, you know, my kids, as they've gotten out into the community and done different things, other people comment on, wow, they're so mature, they're so responsible, they're so this, that, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I remember at one point I was like, my kids fight all the time. What am I doing wrong? And then the church told us, you know, oh, your kids are always such good helpers and they get along so well with everybody. And I was like, okay, I guess they're getting the good messages too. And if they're fighting at home, it's because that's where they're comfortable and they're tired and all of that. So just remember, people will start to see that.
Absolutely.
Hopefully you will hear that feedback when they're little. Like Jen said, as they get older, it does get easier to see the proof of how things are working.
Yeah.
Now, what about one more lie that we often tell ourselves that I think is super important? And that is I don't have time to take care of myself, right? I'm feeding into my kids. I'm feeding into my marriage. I'm feeding into my community. I'm a daughter, a sister, all these different roles, but I don't have time to take care of myself. What do you say to that?
Prioritize. You know, at least on that rotating basis, I have to take care of me. I'm not, or I become not a nice mom. You know, I mean, when I start out not being super warm and fuzzy, and then I just give and give and give and give and give until I'm just wrung out. I'm not always a nice mom. I can tell when I'm like, what we need to do is go take a walk, because like the kid that I have left homeschooling doesn't like to walk with me. He'll go with me and he'll walk, but he'll like zoom ahead so he can walk by himself. And it's just this path through the woods. It's lovely. But I can say, hey, come walk with me, and know that I'm actually going to get alone time. But like, I have to do something for me. I have to, and whatever it is for you, whether it's, you know, reading scripture, whether it's exercising, whether it's, you know, getting your hair cut or getting your nails done or meeting your friends on a regular basis so that, you know, you have people to talk to who you didn't give birth to. Whatever your thing is that makes you feel fed, you have to do that, or you're going to be not a nice mom. And I didn't really realize that until an older mom said to me, like you said, it's more caught than taught. You're showing them that we just have to give and give and give. I'm like, well, I don't want them to do that. Okay, well, if you don't want them to think this is the way we live, then you can't live like that. You know, I answered a question recently somewhere. Somebody said, you know, my kid won't just like sit down for 20 minutes and read. What do I do? And my answer was, so set a timer, pick up your book, tell everybody it's time, and you sit and read for 20 minutes. And when you do that enough days, they'll be like, oh, this is what we do.
Yeah, that is so true. Yeah, and I absolutely agree. You actually pointed out my top two things, which are Bible study and exercise. I am that type A perfectionist, kind of, I don't know, not warm and fuzzy personality type. And so I have discovered that, yeah, if I am not reading my Bible and exercising, I have a tendency to get much angrier over things that aren't as important. As that introvert, I need some time to myself. So what I do is, I'm cute today because I'm on camera, but most of the time, and Jen will tell you when she sees me when we're not doing these things, I'm in exercise attire, so that if I hit a point in my day where I'm like, oh, I'm ready to pull my hair out, I can literally stand up, go to the other room, and start working out if I want to. I also keep my Bible in my office so that it's easy to get to. This room is on the main level of our house. I found if I kept it on my nightstand next to the bed and I needed to access it, I'd have to go upstairs. And so I wasn't doing that. So I found that if I keep my Bible down here and I'm in workout attire, then I'm ready to do those two things that really feed into me. But like you said, it could be anything. It could be you're getting your nails done, going to dinner with your girlfriends, whatever that thing is for you. As a child, I remember my mom always had her face on. She put makeup on every single day, and that told her she was now ready to start her day. And so whatever that is for you, figure out what it is, and please do what you can to make time for it. Practical tips in that regard, if you have littles and the kids are kind of interfering with some of that. If you're a morning person, get up before your kids are up. If you're a night owl, do it after they go to bed. If your kids are a little bit older, Jen, I love what you said about bringing your son on walks with you. Have your kids exercise with you or go outside, take the dog on a walk. Sunshine is also very good for you when you're in kind of that funk. So yeah, all of those things, I think hopefully we have given some good practical advice on the lies that we tell ourselves, or maybe the things that we find frustrating kind of throughout our day. Let's talk more specifically to the learning challenges piece. This is something that can be hard for whether your child has like an officially diagnosed learning issue, or maybe your child is just struggling with a certain subject or topic, because when you're homeschooling, you don't know, am I doing the right thing? Is this normal for what my child's going through? What do I need to do? So let's talk about it for those who maybe have an officially diagnosed learning challenge, or maybe they're suspecting some dyslexia or dysgraphia, some of those types of issues, but they haven't been officially diagnosed. What advice would you give a family in that situation to kind of figure out what's going on and how to approach it?
Well, I mean, if you're trying to figure out what's going on, then my advice would be to use whatever resources you have to figure it out. Just like we would with anything else going on with your body or your brain. There are doctors and, people who assess those kinds of things, who can work with your kid to say, okay, here's what's going on, which is scary, but at least you know. And once you know what you're dealing with, my go-to has always been research everything I possibly can, figure out how it works, how it doesn't work, what I can do to adjust my teaching, my expectations, my parenting, to work with the reality of how that kid's brain works. I don't have any kids with official learning diagnoses, but I have 4 children who are all crazy different. And so I think all of us have to do that to a small degree. And I know from my friends who deal with learning issues and their kids that it's like the same, but intensified, that there's just so much more to learn about and to figure out, and to, kind of the trial and error of adjusting goes deeper.
Yeah. And I think remembering too, to, like you said, use all your resources. So when my son was learning to read, he was struggling badly. And I was like, okay, does he have dyslexia or something like that? Is he not seeing it correctly, like what's going on, because he was
Mm-hmm.
mixing up letters and putting them in the wrong order and all of this. And we take him to the pediatrician, and he doesn't even know his alphabet yet. So he can't really do the eye chart because he just was not learning it. Well, then my daughter is nearsighted and has been wearing glasses for years. So when we were at the eye doctor, I mentioned that, you know, thinking my son was still too young to have an eye screen and all of that, I mentioned it, and they said, well, let's check his eyes too. And we discovered that he's incredibly farsighted and his eyes focus at different ranges. And so, you know, one eye focuses like somebody in their 70s and one like somebody in their 40s. So obviously that's not normal for kids in that 6-7-year-old age range. We got him reading glasses, and immediately he started picking it up. And his biggest issue was just that he could not see the difference between the letters because anything this close was so blurry for him. But that was something that, had we not really dug into it, you know, who knows, we would have thought he maybe had an issue learning to read, or, you know, I thank God every day that we were homeschooling, because he started kindergarten during COVID and he's the quiet kid. So I was like, he may not have learned how to read in a classroom.
And I was thinking, thank God he was homeschooled, because if they were in school, you would have picked her up, taken her to the place by herself, and he would not have been there to check.
Exactly. That's another.
So it is in the hard moments where the real blessings come, because if you hadn't been homeschooling him, he wouldn't have been with you at the doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is a great point. Yeah. So I think if you see something and you're worried about it, it's good because you are there. Yeah. And like you said, Jen, the kids are together. So if, you know, one of your children has an issue, it might be quicker to find out what the younger child is experiencing if it's the same type of thing. But yeah, definitely use all the resources, your pediatrician, your eye doctor, you know, therapy, if your child has been in any sort of speech therapy or anything like that. Also, when it comes to reading, there's such a wide range of what's normal too. So, you know, I had one child reading at 4 and one at 8. So that was just, my two. And I've heard that from other people. And then once they're older, you can't tell oftentimes that it took them that long. So yeah, look at that. Also, if you are suspecting some learning challenges, let's say, like in the case of my son, it was his reading ability. But for some kids, it might be math or science, their writing, you know, other areas like that. So how do you continue moving them forward and teaching to the level they're at, even if maybe they're really strong in certain subjects and not so much in others?
Well, of course, with reading, kids who have like visual trouble reading, or, you know, whatever the issue is with gathering information visually, they can be read to. I have a friend who uses audiobooks extensively for one of her kids, because that it's so much easier for him to take in information by listening. And so it's kind of a workaround. With math, I know that the key for my most math challenged kid was having a hands-on component. And so being able to build math problems made it make sense in his mind, where just doing the abstract numbers and symbols didn't really jive. And so just kind of switching gears and doing something that's hands-on, or doing something that's more relatable, you know, can sometimes get them over a little hump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I think too, what you mentioned about like audiobooks or listening, your child is still absorbing things from that book or that information. And some kids just learn better auditory. That's I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but the people that learn by listening as opposed to seeing. And then you mentioned the kinesthetic piece too for the hands-on learners. So yeah, play around with what's going to work. You mentioned that your kids are all different, and I know mine are too in the way they learn. I have one that can sit and read and learn everything. And then I have one that likes to touch and get up and, you know, love science experiments, anything that you can see and feel and create, you know, it just makes it come alive in a totally different way. So yeah, play around with kind of those different things. Also, should you be concerned if your kids are different levels in different subjects? So a child that maybe is really advanced in math but struggling with reading, how would you handle them, or what should you worry about and what's not a worry?
I think it is not a worry if your child is better at something than something else. If reading comes more easily or reading comprehension comes more easily than, math or science experiments, then I think that's completely, totally normal. I talk to moms who are like, well, she's this level in reading and this level in history and this level in writing and this level in math. I'm like, well, I mean, every kid is, going to have preferences or be stronger in one thing than another. That doesn't concern me at all. When you get a really, really wide range where maybe in one subject you're not seeing progress, like you said with your son, he just wasn't getting it, like not over the course of a week or a month, but like over the course of 6 months. If you're just not seeing any progress, nothing is easier, nothing is he's not understanding something anymore. He's not memorizing his math facts, or he can't comprehend the same thing he couldn't comprehend 6 months ago. That to me sends up a flag. Mm-hmm. That says like, okay, what's the holdup? Because we should be seeing progress, not always smooth progress. I mean, they take leaps and then kind of plateau off, not necessarily progress at the exact same age as a sibling. I mean, I was so super guilty of that. Well, this one could read by age whatever. Oh my gosh. Okay, talk about how we're screwing our kids up.
Well, and that's a good point. Even in like your Sonlight level, because I made the same mistake, right? That in kindergarten we do this level, in first grade we do this level, because that worked with my oldest, my girl, my firstborn, who did not have the issues learning to read. And then along comes my son, who is more active, like a lot of boys are. He was also the baby. Babies, there's a lot into the whole birth order of how your kids mature and develop and all of that too. And then he had the vision issues. And so for me to try to move him along at the same exact level and pace and all the things that I did with his sister, I realized, why did I do that? I should not have done that. But I don't think we always think about those things until we're there. And so now I'm slowing him down. I'm not even looking at, okay, when she was in this grade, she did this, so you're going to do this. Now I'm planning like, okay, well, this year you and I are going to do this, and next year we'll see what level you're going to do then. So remember that even within the own home, like you said, Jen, if there are 0 learning challenges, the personality differences are going to play a big part of that as well. That's a great point. Something that I love about homeschooling too is that you can move at your pace. So if you have an advanced kid, keep them moving along. They don't have to wait for their class to catch up and they're not bored. But if they are struggling with something, you don't have to keep pushing them forward. I think that's the problem. The kids who do fall behind in school, they keep getting pushed forward to the next grade until it's beyond what they can learn. Yeah. And because you're teaching them at home, they don't have the awareness, I think, of what other kids their age are doing either, which is also great because then they can learn and enjoy learning, and there's not the pressure or, feeling like they're falling behind. Because really, I love the way Sonlight's programs are designed, where you can use one level across 3 or 4 grades, in most subjects. Most things do not come with, this is first grade, this is second grade. Right. Even on them. So no matter what your child is learning and how fast they're learning, you can use, that program with them and they can get something out of it. Let's talk about the modifications. You mentioned like audiobooks. What are some other ways to modify it if your child isn't quite capable of doing, Sonlight as it's written? So whether that be the written assignments or keeping up with the reading, what are some ways that you as the parent can modify it and make it more approachable for them?
So like I said, I didn't have any kids with diagnoses. And so, I didn't have to modify as much as other people have, but I modified several things just for the kids I was given. One is my older son hit the science levels before his writing level caught up to those worksheets. And so we did those worksheets out loud for a couple of years, because even when he could physically write the letters, it was so much work for him to like agonize over the letters. And then I'm looking at his grip, and it's taking so long that we're losing the science. And so we just did it out loud. Point to the picture, answer the question. You know, why do bees have fur on their legs? Just tell me. You know, I don't have a class of 30 kids, so I don't need you to write it down on the paper so I can take it home and grade it later. Just tell me if you heard what we read. And then, and audiobooks. Yeah. So I hit those middle school years when I had several kids, which was not my original plan, homeschooling. And so reading those Story of the World books out loud in hook me up, G&H, right? Was beyond what I could handle. I simply could not. It was one too many things, you know? And so I bought the CDs, and I was like, pop that sucker in, and I'm going to like feed the baby, fold the laundry, whatever, while we listen to that, because I can't even read that out loud to you. That was huge. I feel like G&H are like the easiest of those middle level, you know, programs, because I just pop the CD in. And so I don't feel like it's a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Go fun.
Just relax.
When we hit those upper levels, I had one kid who was like, give me the instructor's guide. I will write all the questions down. I am not waiting for you to be available. Just I'll copy the vocabulary. I'll answer all the questions. I'll give it to you in writing. My next kid was like, I am for real not doing all that writing. Crazy lady. I will wait for you to be available, and I will answer it out loud, but certainly not in writing. Both ways worked. I knew whether they had read, whether they had gotten the point. They had to, you know, argue their opinions to me based on the content of what they read. They both knew how to find things on the map. They both learned the vocabulary. And so, you know, we just adjusted. When math is really easy, just go. Just do the pages. When math is really hard, a few problems and rewatch the video is just as good as finishing 2 pages, because it's hard right now. So we pull back the pace when we have to, equally let them fly when they have to. I knew it was time to give up Wordly Wise when I said, oh yeah, we're going to do that this year. And my daughter was like, and what if I finish early? Well, do you have another one? And I said, nope, I only bought one. And this was like in high school. I was like, I only bought one for you this year. So when you're done, you're done. And she took the book from me. And 2 weeks later, she brought it back and she was like, it's done. Don't talk to me about this again. And that was when I realized that like, this was no longer a valuable use of her time. But, you know, we just kind of adjusted a lot of little things. Every time something didn't work, I was like, how can we just tweak this? And Sonlight is so tweakable. So we've really liked that.
Yeah, all these things you've said, I'm laughing because you made it all the way to G before you started doing an audio version of the history. I did the first day of Eastern Hemisphere history and said, here you go, kiddo, read this and fill out your notebook. By that point, my daughter could read well enough, and I was like, this is boring. I'd rather stick to the read alouds and do the things. And I love history, but I did not like that. So we are telling you, it is okay to make those modifications. I love what you said about science too, because kindergarten has worksheets to fill out. And I think people assume that their kindergartner who hasn't even learned how to write yet has to fill that out. I did not have my kids start filling those out until they were old enough to read their own science. So once they could read their own science, then they could fill them out. Also, I will admit that Sonlight is designed and written for you as the parent to read everything all the way through level J. But I have not done that personally because I don't have time to do that. And so if you, once my child was at a reading level where I felt comfortable with letting her read her own science and then her own history, we didn't do it all at once, then her own Bible, whatever it might be, I started getting my oldest to that point where by the time she did level H, I only read read alouds to her because I was also doing level C and reading everything to my younger child. So if you feel like, oh, I'm not doing Sonlight the right way, there is no one right way. We all do it differently. You've got to look at what's going to work with your kids. I would caution you about going too independent before they're ready. But if they're ready, if they can tell you what they read about, if they can answer the discussion questions on anything they're reading, that's what I always did with my oldest is I would ask her the questions after. And now my son, I'm still reading pretty much everything to him because he's only in 3rd grade. And the discussion questions do not make sense to his mind at all. And so with him, I'm just like, okay, what did we read about in that chapter? And he can tell me in minute detail what we read about in that chapter. But if I say, and read the question out of the IG, he's like, who's that? What are you doing?
Well, and you're right. I mean, like my oldest, I hadn't even thought about this, but my oldest was, I don't know, F maybe when my youngest was born. And I handed her a pile of books. Please report in and then give me back the books. I'm sorry. I love you, but I have a brand new baby. I will not be reading this to you. But she was a kid that I could do that. I have 2 who I read everything. I read everything because it would not have gotten done otherwise. And just when I thought I had the hang of it, like with the kindergarten and those early elementary science years, I was like, oh, we're not even going to do the worksheets because the writing level isn't there, whatever. Well, number 3 and 4 came along and they were like, where's my worksheets?
They wanted to be a part.
Right. And so even when, and they colored on them. Because I would read about the fish, the bees, the water, whatever. And, my 3rd one, bless her soul, would just take her little crayons and color in all the frogs and the flowers and all the whatever. And, write her name on, or she would write me notes on there. Dear Mom, I love you. Love, Annie. And it had nothing to do with science, but that was her participating when I was doing, science kind of, with those kids. And so whatever keeps the peace, right? Whatever gets the work done keeps the peace. If you need a worksheet, I will give you a worksheet. I will print you a coloring page. What do I need to do to keep you happy?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said, younger siblings, if they have kind of grown up always being homeschooled because they're there when you're teaching the older kids, a lot of times they do want their own workbook or their own handwriting page or whatever it is. So that's something that you can jump in and have them do. But basically what we're saying is figure out what is going to work for your kids during that season of life. So for me, I've always said, which child needs me the most? That's where I'm going to put the most attention. So for both of my kids, that was kind of that kindergarten through 3rd grade point. So when my oldest was in that range, I was giving her more attention and letting my son just kind of wander around and play. And if I could read some pre-K books to him, I did, but it wasn't a huge deal. And then now that he's in that age group, my oldest does a lot of her work independently and just checks in with me throughout the day. But you will find different seasons, different things work better. And no matter what pace your child is learning at, you can move it wherever they need to go. Nobody is going, oh my goodness, you didn't finish all of whatever level you're doing in this calendar year. I mean, you have time, you can stretch it, you can move faster. Jen, I know you like to do kind of getting ahead in different subjects, which I
don't like to. It just happens. It just happens. And I am the kind of person who I can just roll with it. Right now, we're doing J. We're on week 19 to 22, which I know makes you sweat, even just knowing that about me. But because we're a little bit behind in one book, but in my mind, it's all going to come out and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It's always fine. We make it work. We finish everything. It's cool. It's going to be cool. But it doesn't work for everybody, including Sunny, who is itching just having this conversation.
Yeah, I have to be on the same week in every subject. So if we finish week 19 HBL, you better believe we're doing week 19 language arts before we crack open week 20 HBL. But again, that's a difference in personality. Your personality plays a part as well as your kids. But Jen, your approach really is more true to when you think about adult life, and we put away books we don't want to finish reading as adults. So what you're doing is actually more of a real world approach. But you do have to look at what's going to work for you, what's going to send you over the edge. That sends me over the edge more than if it takes 2 or 3 weeks to do one instructor's guide week. So
well, and part of it too is that I am happy to adjust for different things. Like when you're talking about language arts, I have never required my kids to do every assignment every year. Mm-hmm. Ever. And so there are things where we'll read through, like we'll do the first couple of days work, we'll read through all those lessony parts, and then we'll talk about what the writing assignment would look like, or we'll talk about it based on a writing assignment they just did, or we'll go back and edit something and do like a next draft of something they just did, but we do not do every assignment. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's like, okay, and we're skipping that, moving on. And so I don't know, it just ends up unbalanced. That's basically my life. Yeah. I mean, you talk about like, how am I screwing my kids up? Well, yeah, there is an element of wing it that goes on in my house. So sorry.
Yeah, but I think that's good, and that's okay. You guys need to know that is okay. Because I think when you're starting out, especially if you have that natural type A bent like I do, I thought I had to do every single thing in the IG the day it was assigned. And the longer I've done this, the more I realize, no, my kids are learning. I don't have to do it exactly how it's assigned. I can cut out assignments. I can read something, even like your child's reader. If they are struggling to read it, you can read that to them, or you can get an audiobook version. You know, what is in the Sonlight Instructor's Guide truly is a guide, and it's a suggestion for you. And if you're looking for tips on how to better modify the approach because of whatever unique situation you're going through, post that in the app and we'll all weigh in. You know, Jen and I obviously do some things very differently. And when you ask all the mentors, there's some things we like to do more similarly, and then other things that we've all done totally differently. So we can give you different tips and advice on that. We are actually running low on time as per usual, because I always have so much fun talking to you guys. So Jen, thank you so much for being here. If you were watching and you have any questions, thank you to those who did watch live. And I did see you guys commenting as we went along. So I think we're getting used to the new app. But if we did not get to your question, please put it in the comments and we will definitely make sure to follow up with you. And especially if you're watching this later, we would love to do that. Also, if you did not see the announcement and you want a printed catalog this year, so I have last year's catalog here. If you want the actual paper copy catalog, you need to go in and request it. Sonlight is not mailing those out automatically, but we would love to mail you one if you want one. The digital catalog will be available starting February 8th. Maybe sooner if we can get it up there sooner. So you guys will definitely be able to download that to make choices for purchasing and all of that starting on February 8th and see all the new updates for 2023. I'm really excited for you guys to see those. I think you're going to love several of them. But if you want a printed copy of the catalog mailed to you, make sure you request that as well. So we'll drop that link on the replay too. So that way you guys can request that. Jen, thank you so much for being here. And
thank you, Sunny,
for running our chat. Like I said, I always love these events and love getting to talk to you. And for those of you watching, if we didn't get to your question, please let us know.
Absolutely.